Hello, system scientists. My name is Shan Turnbull, and I live in Sydney, Australia. I would like to start a conversation on an urgent need for system scientists to share their unique knowledge on how human existential risks can be mitigated. System scientists have demonstrated that they know how to design processes for self-driving automobiles to survive new, dynamic, complex environments with numerous existential risks. System scientists understand that regulating complexity is impossible without a requisite variety of bottom-up feedback channels. This is how DNA designs humans to become self-regulating. Self-governing automobiles, like our brains, have no central controller, but a requisite variety of distributed decision-making centers competing for dominance according to internal and external risks and opportunities. This ecological form of governance is radically different from that studied by social scientists. This is why world leaders urgently require system scientists to advise them in a similar way that they needed medical specialists to guide them in a pandemic. It is why social scientists and educators have an urgent task to retool their intellectual contributions to quickly distribute this knowledge. This is because implementation needs to occur in the wider community on a comprehensive bottom-up basis as required for a pandemic. Hierarchies create toxic problems as they frustrate, deny, and punish human nature that is hardwired to possess dual complementary contrary behavior. This is inconsistent with dictatorial authority. Ecological governance is dependent upon using our dual behavior so it can be replicated and amplified with requisite variety to control wicked problems. Wicked problems are those that create the tragedy of the commons. These arise when one individual or group overexploits life-sustaining resources to deny them for everyone. A wicked problem has now arisen for the first time in history at a global level. According to Lord Stern, a former World Bank chief economist, climate change is the greatest market failure the world has ever seen. Market failure arose because the cost of burning carbon did not recognize the cost of its pollution. This means the risk of human extinction has arisen from the dependence of modern society on markets and hierarchy. The existence of self-regulating and self-governing living things proves that neither markets or hierarchies are required. It also explains why the special knowledge of system sciences is so critical. The 2009 Nobel Prize in Economics recognized that neither markets nor hierarchies are required to overcome wicked problems. Lynn Ostrom was recognized for providing evidence how even in pre-modern societies, the tragedy of the commons was avoided. Ostrom was not an economist, but a political scientist. She described solutions in the language of a discipline as being based on the formation of polycentric republics. In the 1970s, I authored the constitutions for two national Australian non-profit organisations that created self-governing polycentric republics. As a director of the Company Directors Association of Australia, I rewrote its constitution to create self-governing state chapters to motivate local initiatives. This provided bottom-up incentives to grow its membership. In 1990, it became the Australian Institute of Company Directors. This now has 45,000 members, making it the largest organisation of its kind in the world. As the Honorary Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Controlling Body for Skiing, I incorporated the organisation. This process federated its self-governing state bodies that in turn had federated their constituent self-governing clubs. The state bodies, like the national body, became self-governing units or hold-ons of the International Controlling Body for Skiing that in turn is a self-governing component of the self-governing Olympic organization. This hierarchy of hold-ons creates what system scientists describe as a holarchy. Holarchies are radically different from hierarchies, as outlined by D. Hock, who founded the ecologically governed Visa Corporation. Avoiding the risk of human extinction will depend upon our ability to establish global cybernetic networks of holarchies to protect and nurture the global commons. There are many other examples of polycentric republics in sporting, civic, and business organizations. My PhD research into firms governed by more than one board identified a number of enterprises that met the test of being composed of polycentric republics. Each firm for 50 years has provided evidence for the resiliency and competitiveness of ecological governance. A powerful way to protect and nurture our environment is to transform corporations to become a common good. This requires corporations to provide benefits for all their stakeholders. A commitment to this objective was undertaken by the chief executive officers from the US Business Roundtable in 2019. However, it introduces a fundamental conflict between shareholders and other stakeholders. Larry Fink, who is the largest asset manager in the world, proposed a solution to this wicked problem in 2018. Fink wrote to this chief executive officers of thousands of firms in which he has votes, proposing a new model of corporate governance. 16 years earlier, the UK-based New Economics Foundation sought an alternative to government ownership or Thatcher privatization. As a result, they commissioned me to write A New Way to Govern, Organizations and Society After Enron. I described how after the time horizon of investors, corporate ownership could be transferred to stakeholders. Governments use ownership transfer as a way to fund infrastructure. Ownership transfers to stakeholders democratizes the wealth of nations. It avoids economic vandalism by investors being overpaid in a way that is not reported by accountants. Any profit arising after the time horizon of investors represents profit surplus to the incentive to invest. Economists like Piketty do not even have a word to describe this major source of inequality of income, wealth, and power. As surplus profits are not reported, they cannot be managed or taxed. However, the endowment of stakeholders with surplus profits can be encouraged by self-funding tax incentives. The appendix of my 1975 book on democratizing the wealth of nations shows how institutional investors with a fiduciary duty to maximize profits would paradoxically become obliged to support votes for changing corporate constitutions to become ecological endowment firms. This is because the tax incentive would provide them with bigger profits quicker with less risk in return for them giving up their equity. The United Nations published these ideas in 4 languages in 1976. They included how more foreign investment can be obtained on a basis that alien ownership fades out with a profit. Local citizens become endowed with ownership and control to legitimize stakeholder governance while maintaining shareholder primacy. In this way, a requisite variety of stakeholder republics can be formed to introduce self-governance of wicked problems within the firm and from global institutions. Polycentric republics can still be introduced while maintaining shareholder primacy with tax incentives as shown in the figure earlier. The case studies of my PhD research described in my earlier PowerPoint inspired this generic model. Details are presented in my many articles and cited in the video prepared as a discussion paper this year for the World Organization of Systems and Cybernetics. Additional details are included in my July 15, 2020 keynote global webinar on the case for radical reform of corporate governance. The URLs are presented in the PowerPoint. My discussion paper is based on my academic article prepared for the now deferred Moscow 18th Annual Congress of the World Organization of Systems and Cybernetics. The video and discussion paper outline how my PhD dissertation introduced the concept of tensegrity and also bits and bytes as a unit of analysis to understand and or design polycentric compound republics. This has transformed cybernetics from the science of control and communication and the animal and the machine, as defined by Norbert Wiener, to now become the science of governance. Governance science explains why DNA hardwires creatures to possess dual, contrary, supplementary behaviors to survive and thrive and reproduce in complex, unknowable, dynamic environments. It provides scientific basis for system scientists to guide our political leaders, CEOs, and society to most efficiently, reliably, and comprehensively survive existential threats and risks to humanity. I thank you for your attention.